Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Realize the World podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about accountability, and accountability at least self accountability, is a self awareness of one of the highest kind. Um, I believe this is what a lot of the motivational speakers, and people who tell you can reprogram your mind, change your mindset to become successful, etc., etc. A lot of those things along those lines. This is where I believe a lot of that comes from, and that once you start to generate a self-awareness, that you begin to realize your thoughts, your feelings, emotions, your actions, everything is a result of how you interact with the world. That's to say, it all begins with your thoughts. Okay, so if you perceive something as bad, it shouldn't happen, or you don't like that it is the way it is. Maybe it's a color, a car, uh, somebody's behavior. It could be anything. But when you judge it and you resist the fact that it is the way it is, you're accountable for that thought. So that's to say, if you've never tried something new because you didn't like it, although maybe years down the road you find out you're really good at it, that's the consequence of your own actions, your own thoughts. And it's like that with a lot of things, even with children. You try to get them to eat new foods, something out of their normal, and they resist it. They don't want it. Maybe it's a vegetable, and you know, for whatever reason, vegetables have a stereotype of being disgusting and not flavorful, or whatever the case is. Very common, at least in America, that kids don't want to eat something like broccoli, or I guess it really depends on where you're from, but that's how I kind of grew up. Um, I don't put those ideas in my children's head, but they perceive the vegetables kind of the same way, and yeah, and it's happened even with my wife. I've gotten them to try new foods, and they're like, "Oh wow, I do like this." And for so long, in some cases for years, like my wife wouldn't eat shrimp or lobsters or any type of seafood. I guess what do you call them? Shellfish. So for about 30 years of her life, and I guess not really when you're a baby, you can't eat them, but for a majority of her life, she didn't eat something that she really loves now. We go out to eat, she orders shrimp as a side with anything she can almost get. But that's to say, accountability begins with how you perceive something. Um, and judging's a whole nother topic. Judging, comparing, um, putting extra thoughts to something rather than accepting just the way it is. It all begins there. So we'll be on the premise, or the assumption that judgment isn't really an issue here, and that we are at a level of awareness where um, we can start to take accountability for our actions. So, or I'm sorry, for our thoughts. So once we can take accountability for those thoughts, we're in control of them. Then obviously the next step is, what thoughts you do act on, your actions. And ultimately we're responsible for those. You can't, there's a saying like it's not like I put a gun to your head to make you do it, right? Because and that's truth. Even though you might have been in a tight spot and for whatever reason you had to do something you didn't want to do, ultimately you did it. It was your decision, and that could have been based on the circumstances, and that you had to do something that you rather have not, and maybe it was forced upon you. But again, this is just this where the other party could say it's not like I put a gun to your head. Or there's also the saying, if everybody's jumping off the bridge, are you gonna do it too? And that's one of those sayings more about being a follower than or being a leader rather than a follower. Um, are you going to be accountable for what you're doing, or you're just going to do what everybody else is doing because that's apparently the norm? And essentially, that's really what social conditioning is. It may not be life or death where you're jumping off a bridge, but if you're just being like a sheep going with the flock, you're accountable for that. You're responsible for that action, not general society or your parents or religion or the law. Whatever, for whatever reason you have to do whatever you may be doing, you are ultimately the decider of that. Once you decide to process the thought from the mind into the actions of your body, that's you. There's nobody else. And sure, after the fact, you can blame somebody. You can try to blame the event or the way the world is. But at that point, that's wasting energy. You're expending energy on... I don't even know what to call blame at this point, but you would be wasting energy on not being accountable for your own action. So, everybody, right now, no matter when you're listening to this, is responsible for where they are in their life at this point. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're in school, whether you're working, whether you're not doing any of those, the type of house you're in, the type of car you drive, what you're wearing, your hairstyle, everything in your life is a result of you. Nobody else. Yeah, maybe you inherited some money where you can afford a lot of things, but that's something that you can't really say, that I'm responsible for that, but that's just another happening. Like the state of the world. We all can't control the state of the world. But, when something happens, how you react to it, what you do going forward, those are the actions we're accountable for. So if you inherit some money and you go blow it all on a big house and big, not big cars, but expensive cars, fancy cars, and then you don't have any more money, that's your fault. Or if you inherit that money and turn around and reinvest it, that's your fault. And we can't really say fault with the negative or positive context, and that those are the consequences of your actions. So on a more mental level, if something happens to you, and let's say for me, and this is a big one, I'll give you a personal example here. Okay, so in my past job, I work very hard, take a lot of pride in my work. I had this feeling that hard work deserves reward. Or maybe it's not even a feeling. It was like, that's how I believed the world to have worked. And so 1 year I didn't get a raise because I got a mid-year increase, and I wouldn't even say at the time I didn't feel like it was substantial enough. But I didn't get that increase, and so and this I think was before I had my awakening. Yeah, it was. So I didn't really get to marinate on these feelings before I was able to accept them. But I didn't get that increase, and it just felt like everything I did was for no reason. And I started replaying things from the past. I went above and beyond for certain different things, and there was no reward. And so I didn't feel worthless, but I felt betrayed. It wasn't worth like it hurt me personally that with my self esteem and self worth, maybe some of the self worth, but it wasn't like a blow to my personal life. It was more like my work life, I guess. And yeah, it was. I was totally in charge of those feelings. I was totally in charge to how I reacted to that situation. Um, then I started to manifest feelings of, oh, I went above and beyond. I did, I spent extra hours on the weekend doing this and that, and trying to make everything perfect, and I got nothing for it. So then I started replaying the past and starting to have regrets, and obviously that's I'm compounding the problem at that point. Um, as far as the other end of the spectrum, as far as future and anxiety, I didn't really get into that. Other than, oh well, yeah, I did. I didn't get anxiety, but I started to play out and project myself in the future. Okay, well, since I didn't get rewarded for it this year, then I'm gonna just slack off the following year, and thoughts like that. Um, Already kind of planning out a revenge of some sort, where it wasn't really like to sabotage, but and I guess it would have been self sabotage, in that I wasn't gonna do actions that would reflect well upon myself, but I wasn't going to give it my best because I wasn't rewarded in the past. And that's not a proper way to think, no matter how you may feel about what I just said, whether you agree or don't agree. Um, it's all about accountability. So if I were to have slacked off, I would have been at fault. No matter how I would have looked at it, paying back the company for not paying me, um, that would, again, it would just reflect bad on me. If I really don't like the situation, I'm responsible for the situation I'm in. I can be responsible for taking myself out of the situation. That's not to say what I did now, I no longer work, but I did take myself out of the situation, and that I didn't feel like what I was doing was amounting to my inner purpose, what I really desired in life, um, or where I want to be in life, or what I want to be doing with what I found. So that example there, how I perceived the event, how all the emotions, how I reacted, I'm accountable for that. That was my own doing. That was nobody else's doing except my own. And the scenario I was in, again, like I said, if I really didn't like it, I could have left the company and go work somewhere else. I put myself there. And if I decided to stay there, that's, again, I'm accountable for that. There's nobody else. Nobody else. You know, you can't blame the fact that you have bills. I have bills to pay. If that's the choice you go with, you made that choice. You made the decision to stay somewhere you don't like because you believe your bills are life or death and that you sacrifice your happiness. That's not to say sacrifices aren't proper, because there are times where, you know, you feel like you might have to sacrifice, but it's just part of the path. And whether you decide to stick on that path, face those obstacles head on, you know, that's part of your growth. But if you feel like you're on cruise control, you know, you're no longer climbing the mountain, you plateaued, then and you continue to do so, you don't try to go for higher success, you don't try to, you know, settle for something lower, easier on your life. That's your own doing. The other day, and I give you a kind of harsh, not really harsh, but it was kind of like blunt. My daughter was on her bike, and my son ran into the back wheel with his power wheel, and she dropped her cookie. And she honestly believed it was his fault. If she had a higher level of awareness, which, you know, this is not necessarily the accountability awareness, but the awareness of what's going on. You know, obviously she may have been caught in the thought of eating and concentrating on that she didn't know where this toddler was. You know, you can't necessarily say it's his fault because he can't control his power wheel. He knows what he did. But my daughter not having that grip on the cookie, and it's not like he ran her over. It was like a bump, which made her drop the cookie. And she was blaming him, and so, you know, that there's a lot of things in life where we try to blame others. Yeah, you know, I'm late to work because the dogs ran off instead of coming back in a timely manner. When actuality, you know, you're late for work because you didn't leave on time. If you know you have to leave, let the dogs out, build in time in your schedule. Wake up earlier. You know, these aren't things that you say, oh, if I could go back in the past, I would do this. But this is part of how you grow. You know, these are lessons in life, no matter how big or small, that you develop or you gain experience from. And then you apply them in the next time you find yourself in that situation. Now, you know, there's that saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I don't know exactly how it goes, but then, like, the third time should be it. You know, you should have learned by then. But that's essentially what we're saying here. You know, if you're not learning, and no matter how many times it happens to you, that's your own fault. You know, and if you're going to keep blaming somebody every time it happens rather than start taking accountability for the actions that or what's happening or how you respond to it, or where you place yourself before that event happens, that's your own doing. For whatever reason, and I believe it's human emotions, we like to blame others. You know, we don't want to be the ones at fault. We don't want to be the ones on the end of repercussion. We don't want to be the... Now, it's kind of weird because we don't look at it as a two-way street. It's a one-way street where I do want to get praise for the good things that happen, but when the bad things happen, there's no going the other way. It's kind of like, hey, it stops here. You know, I don't want to be responsible for going down the negative street, but I will for the positive street. If you know, if that helps one understand, you know, it's all a matter of perception. Whether it's good or bad, it happens. It's a happening. So for some reason we shy away from the negative things, and that's probably because of the way social conditioning, generational conditioning, cultural conditioning. When bad things happen, we tend to associate it with punishment, and so we kind of put that idea in the heads of children at an early age, where they don't want to be accountable for bad things. And that grows into a bigger idea as they become an adult of not taking accountability for their life, where they're at. You know? Oh, I'm poor because I was born here. No, you're poor because you continue to live there, because you stay there, because you have that mindset. You're manifesting your lack of financial richness. It's like that with anything. It's not a issue with race. It's not an issue with financial standings, social status, gender. Because when you play into those social ideas and you play into those roles, that was the last podcast episode, then you are accountable for that. This is the two-way street. Your responsibility for the good thing and bad things in your life. Not just the good things and the roadblock the bad things. So once you decide to step out of this, once you realize this, you stop playing those games, then you can realize, yeah, it was me. I was here. I am here because of what I decided to do. And yeah, it's easier said than done, because I battled with this for the longest time, at least from my teenage up until when I had an awakening. That I wanted to lose weight. I wanted to be a race car driver. I wanted to have a lot of money. I wanted to have a certain types of cars. I wanted to have a certain size of a house, a big house. And some of those things I didn't have. Some of those things I had issues doing. And it was all me. I at one point in my adventures of trying to lose weight, I got down to like 180 pounds from 220 is my highest. So at one point I was steady 200, but I got down to 180, doing really good as far as progress. I was working out, which was kind of pushing me, and one day I stepped off the workout routine, and then I let that become 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, and then I was right back. I undid all that progress to get back to that 200, 220 pound range. And I'll tell you, it wasn't somebody else's fault. It was my fault. I, for whatever reason, at that time, threw in the towel of maintaining a healthier lifestyle. I've had similar success with, not similar success, but similar weight loss experience with different diets, and then I would just stop the diet. Oh, I did Weight Watchers. I did Weight Watchers for I think about a year, and then I one day just decided to stop using the app and tracking what I wanted or what I ate, and eventually undid all the progress from that. So there's accountability that plays into everything you do. Your thoughts and your actions. I could not maintain a healthy lifestyle with the frame of mind that I had back then. It was for one, I can tell you my mind was like a game of Pong, the old game where a ball would bounce back across the screen, back and forth. Kind of like ping pong, but it was like on the high level, really fast. That's how my mind has felt, and I've shared that with people and back then, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I totally know what you mean." And when your mind and your thoughts are flying all over the place, you can't really focus or maintain focus on where you want to be. And developing awareness can help you do that. But for the topic of today, accountability, realizing that my mind was the way it was before was all my doings. I would sit on social media, I would just watch TV, I would just play video games, I would work excessive hours, I would go to sleep late, I would drink, I would smoke. There's a lot of habits that I had that don't amount to being able to not necessarily control my mind, but have some form of control over the thoughts in my head. Like today, I can't necessarily say I'm 100% in control of my mind because I have ideas that come out of nowhere, or thoughts that come out of nowhere. And those are just, I would say, a result of interacting with the environment around me, or being in the environment that I'm at. That's why people will tell you surround yourself with the type of people you want to be with. Even if you're not as smart as them, if you want to be a scientist, hang out with some scientists. Put yourself in people who are in that similar frame of mind or position you want to be in, knowing that you're accountable for where you are. There's another example I wanted to bring up with like law, um, crimes, and so in our society, we we also feed into that blaming of others for certain events. And yeah, I mean, like murder is something that the person needs to take accountability for, right? So that's not a good example, but this is where the law and justice will come in correctly. But if somebody murders someone, um, our law or justice system will condemn them for that action. Um, Now, the type of condemnation, if that's how you say it, is totally up to the country. It's independent of us. At least I'm not a lawmaker or police officer or enforcer. But that makes the person accountable. Now, whether that person says they murdered the other in self-defense or some extreme circumstances, maybe to save another human being, this is where our law or justice system kind of it's not black and white. This is where the judges come into play. This is where the juries come into play. And unfortunately, unconscious beings judging in general, it's not really a good thing, so to say, in that emotions and other things play into it. But where I'm going with this is that in nature, there is no law, there is no justice. You know, if you're on top of the food chain, you're on top of the food chain, right? I mean, we've all seen videos of animals eating other animals. I can't really refer to like National Geographic anymore because there's plenty of documentaries on Netflix and other services. But for whatever wild animal documentary you may be watching, you may see a baby gazelle get eaten by a tiger or a lion or a cheetah. Nobody in the animal world condemns the tiger or the lion for eating the gazelle. I remember somebody corrected me on this, gazelle. Um, but that's just the way it is. That's life. But us humans with higher intellectual capacity, we have a sense of playing God, and especially when some of our stuff's founded on religious ideas. No matter how much we may say they're separate, the church and the government is separated. Um, we all agree to some extent. You know, for example, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't lie, things to that nature. Um, are things that shouldn't be done. However, the extent of punishment and how that's enforced by a government or state is it's it's an extreme idea of enforcing accountability. Um, Accountability does not have worth until the individual is ready to be accountable. And we see this happen in prisons and jails, after we essentially put people there to rot. That they recover, the prison system's doing its job and helping reform criminals and prepare them to re-enter society. But that's all role playing, and you can't force an individual to take accountability for their actions until they're ready, until they have some type of awakening, at least, and not necessarily a grand spiritual awakening, but an awakening to the idea of, oh, I'm responsible for being in jail because I killed that person. Yes, okay. And then I didn't follow the rules, which have been published for everybody, or I grew up in and should very well know them, being a resident of this country or state. Da 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 da. It plays out to where, okay, yeah, I was negligent of the rules. I was negligent of the human life. Only when that individual is ready to accept the way things are because they put themselves there does a justice system work. And it, while that's it's kind of like imposed accountability. You know, the bigger message here is that, you know, we're all responsible for where we are right now. And whether you decide to acknowledge that and accept it, or continue to play in the land of unconsciousness, or blame, or for whatever reason you resist the idea that I'm here because of what I've done, you know, that's certainly up to you. But when you have an awakening that I'm here because of what I've done, only then is when you can start to make changes in your life towards some of the greater things you may want. Um, you also got to realize when I hesitate to say things you want or things I want to do, or things to that nature. Um, you got to listen to a couple of these other podcasts I've done about desires, because you could be very well be playing into desires of um ill-intentioned, or unknowingly ill-intentioned, or things that'll only last you a while. This is having an awakening and making changes in your life is a it's not even multi-step, because it's all going on at once, and that's where the awareness comes in, that you have to be aware. Okay, my desires, are these from the genuine me or the ego? And then the factors of social conditioning are there, the role playing. um Shoot, I can't remember some of the other topics I've done, but there's a lot of things going on that you have to be aware of. Then you can make these changes in your life. But it all starts with you, where you're at right now, realizing where you're at right now, realizing that everything you've done is a direct result of your action. Forget karma, whether, and especially that misconception of an idea, karma, what goes around comes around. No, karma is simply action. Everything that happens after, yeah, it may be a result of your action, but that karma, the definition of karma, does not mean what goes around comes around. That's like an Urban Dictionary type of definition. That's like a slang use of karma. But, and then also, whether you believe in reincarnation and you are where you're at because of a previous life, if you have that belief, guess what? You're accountable for that belief, and your actions have all been in line with that belief up until now. If you want to continue to play into that belief, your decision. You're accountable for that. If you want to change it, you have that power to take actions to make those changes. Now, whether things line up for you or not, that's just life. And the big part of it is accepting the way things are, and not letting them stop you. Do you see it as a roadblock or just another obstacle on that path? It's all your decisions. If you get discouraged and perceive it as a roadblock and don't continue with whatever you were trying to accomplish, your decision. That's why they tell you, when you get knocked down, get up again. Don't let it discourage you. Every failure is an opportunity for learning. All of us move at different paces, and some of us will get knocked down and not get up again, and will be discouraged, and perhaps that's for their greater purpose. But you have to realize, from the or at a higher level, bigger picture, it's ultimately up to the individual. They can't blame, I couldn't do that because I'm a woman, or my gender is a factor in why I can't do that. No, it's a factor because you made it a factor. It starts with the thoughts, and you took the actions to take yourself off that path. That's being accountable from square one. This whole world has been molded by humans. The way we live, the way we eat, a lot of the things that we do, this technology I'm on, humans are like artists. Or I don't want to say we're like gods because that's really what we try to do and that we try to control a lot of things. But the things that we can control, we mold into what we want. So that's what a lot of life is like for us. And the day you put down the paintbrush and decide, oh, I can't become an astronaut because I'm too fat, that's your decision. You have put down your art tools to live a lesser life of what you once desired. And maybe, you realize that desire would only be temporary. Yeah, maybe I don't want to float around in space and be away from my family. Certainly a legitimate reason. But if you were to discourage yourself simply because your weight, maybe you're young. Like for me, I wanted to be a jet pilot when I was in middle school until I don't remember what grade, but I had to get glasses. And back then, LASIK didn't exist. And I knew that jet pilots had to have 20/20 vision. As soon as I had to get glasses, I wiped that idea right off my plate. I still get impressed when I see jets. Now why I don't become a jet pilot now? Well, it's not in my hand. It's not in my deck of cards. That's not what I'm trying to do at this point. But back then, because I simply had to wear glasses, scratched that idea off my dreams, and that I manifested that. I'm accountable for that. I didn't aspire to become the first jet pilot that had to wear glasses. I didn't aspire to push for a change in those laws or rules for jet pilots. And maybe that's that's somebody else's job, but or not job, but purpose in life. But certainly hasn't been mine. Not up to this point, at least. So I hope that helps to put those personal examples, put a face to accountability. It can take a lot for people who aren't ready to accept the way things are to do this. It's all part of a greater awakening, though. That if you once you realize you're in control of your life, easier said than done. I'm well aware, but you got to take the time to take care of yourself, because you can't do anything else until you take care of yourself. You can be a robot, a zombie, work a 9 to 5 every day, go to school every day, follow a college curriculum every day. Certainly up to you. You may be content with it, but if you're not content with it, you got to realize you're responsible for where you are. Okay? So thank you everybody for listening to this episode. Be sure to use that like button, subscribe button, follow buttons, whatever media outlet you found this podcast on. Please support it, and that the way a lot of these things work, a lot of the social media outlets work is, they don't promote content that doesn't drive traffic. So, even sharing a video or the podcast episode, those statistics add up to where maybe my content would be suggested based on other content a lot of you guys would view also. So if you want to help me get this message out, that's how you can show support for this video. None of it's monetized, and it's strictly all done as a service to the world. So thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.